Today was supposed to be the start of our honeymoon, a trip my husband and I had been planning for months, but just as we were about to leave, he unexpectedly tore up my passport. I was confused and angry. I never planned to travel with him in the first place. I had always intended to go with my mom. Before we got married, there had been some tension, but I didn't realize how serious the issues were between my husband and his mother. It was shocking to me that no one had ever mentioned anything like this, how a mother-in-law could take control of the honeymoon plans. I started to doubt my marriage and felt something was wrong when my husband began tearing up my passport, especially with his mother standing there, grinning. I knew I needed to get out of this situation quickly. It wasn't just anger I felt, it was disbelief, but it was also a bit of a wake-up call, giving me the evidence I needed to take action against both of them. Let me introduce myself. I'm Catherine, 30 years old. I've been working for 5 years now. Recently, my boyfriend proposed to me, and I was thrilled, excited about our wedding and honeymoon plans. I never expected to get married so soon, especially since I had never really dated anyone seriously after college. But when my husband, who was senior at the company I worked for, asked me out, I felt like he was mature and trustworthy. He always supported me at work, and I thought he was reliable. After a few months of dating, he proposed, and I said yes. We went on many fun dates before the proposal, and I thought everything was going perfectly. I even remembered our first date at the aquarium, an exciting and joyful night that I couldn't stop thinking about. We were so happy, but then we visited his parents' house, and my excitement about our wedding began to fade. My father-in-law was welcoming, but my mother-in-law seemed indifferent, even critical. She told me that her son could have married someone better than me. Her words made me feel unsure about our future, but I convinced myself it was just pre-wedding nerves and kept moving forward with the plans. Later, my husband and his mother made it clear that I would have to quit my job after we got married. At first, I thought leaving work might be the right choice, but as I thought about it more, I realized I didn't want to give up my career. Even though my mother-in-law kept pushing me to quit, I decided to stay at my job and work with my husband at the same company. The wedding planning was stressful. My husband wanted to register our marriage quickly, and we went with his decision, but when we discussed the wedding, my mother-in-law insisted it had to be big and grand. She even said we should only invite my parents and close friends, saying my other friends wouldn't add anything special to the celebration. She wanted to control everything, guest lists, decorations, even the food. Her plans pushed our budget way over what we had originally planned. My family ended up covering most of the costs for all the extravagant touches she wanted. I tried to make a few changes to save some money, but she noticed and scolded me for making the wedding look cheap. After all the stress of planning, I hoped for some peace after the wedding, but things didn't improve. Then, my husband surprised me by telling me we'd be moving into his family's home instead of the apartment we had already secured. I was shocked and upset. No one consulted me about this decision, and it felt like I had no control over anything. The day of our honeymoon arrived, and even though I was excited, I couldn't shake off the worries about the wedding and moving in with his mom. But then, in the middle of the night, just as we were about to leave for the airport, my husband casually dropped a bombshell. "I'm going with my mom instead," he said. I couldn't believe it. "What do you mean? We booked everything for us, not for you and your mom," I said, stunned. He calmly explained that he never agreed to go with me and had planned to go with his mother instead. He said it was a thank you trip for everything his mom had done for him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then he destroyed my passport in front of me, just as I stood there, shocked. His mother walked in, and they both seemed so pleased with themselves. In that moment, I realized I had made a huge mistake marrying into this family. My husband and his mother had planned everything behind my back, even booking everything under her name and leaving me to pay for the whole thing. The betrayal was hard to take, and it marked a turning point in how I saw our relationship. I spent the next few days feeling devastated and angry. I couldn't believe how my wedding and honeymoon had turned into the worst experiences of my life. It was hard to accept that this was my reality. But instead of wallowing in sadness, I knew I had to do something. I had kept a record of things happening since we started wedding planning, thinking they would be nice memories. But now, those recordings were invaluable, proof of my mother-in-law's hurtful behavior and how she had been interfering in our lives. As I packed my bags, preparing to leave his family's house, I found something shocking, evidence that my husband had been stealing money from his company. He had been reporting false sales figures and pocketing the difference. His mother had kept track of the stolen money and even used it to buy herself luxury items. I was horrified. I thought about letting this go, but I realized I couldn't protect someone who had already betrayed me so badly, so I decided to take the evidence to my company. When I walked into the office, everyone was surprised to see me. They were curious about why I wasn't on my honeymoon. I explained the situation, about my husband and his mother going on the trip instead, and how they had destroyed my passport. I also mentioned that I had paid for everything. As I explained my story, I realized that this was the end of my marriage, but it also revealed what kind of people I had married into. My co-workers, bosses, and superiors were all shocked and angry on my behalf. I appreciated their support, but what no one knew was that one of the top executives at the company was my uncle, who had always treated me like family. I had kept our relationship a secret because I didn't want anyone to think I had used my connections to get my job, but now, in my time of need, I knew he would help me. Thanks to my uncle, I began to see a way forward. The pain and betrayal were still there, but I knew I had to move on. I was ready to start over, away from the deceitful people who had hurt me. I joined the company, and my only interactions with my uncle had been professional, except for a brief moment during orientation. When I went into his office, his smile quickly turned to concern as he noticed something was wrong. "Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" he asked. Seeing his familiar face, I broke down and told him everything that had happened. His face turned angry, something I hadn't seen before. After I explained about my husband's embezzlement and showed him the proof, my uncle promised to hold a meeting to deal with it. He was supportive and suggested we grab a meal to take my mind off things for a while before he drove me home. Although I was hurt by the betrayal, I was thankful for the people who cared about me. About a week later, when my husband and mother-in-law returned from what was supposed to be our honeymoon, my husband called, furious that I hadn't picked them up or cleaned the house like he asked. He wanted to know where I was. By then, I had already hired a lawyer with the help of my uncle and parents, and the divorce was already in progress. I firmly told my husband, "I'm divorcing you, I don't need to listen to you anymore." This marked the end of our relationship. He seemed shocked and kept yelling, "Do you think it's okay to talk to me like that? I did you a favor by marrying you. If we divorce, no one else will want you. My mom is also mad. If you come back and cook for us, I might forgive you." His words were shocking, especially after what he had done. I realized the man I thought I knew wasn't really there. I consulted a lawyer about the divorce while reflecting on everything. I told him, "Talk to my lawyer if you want to discuss this." He didn't believe it, saying, "We're not getting a divorce." I could hear his mother yelling insults in the background. I responded, "I've already told the company about your embezzlement. They might call you soon. You should probably get a lawyer too. Goodbye." I could hear him panicking, but I didn't care anymore. He kept calling, but I blocked him. My uncle had already made sure the company knew, and they confirmed the embezzlement. The amount was huge. When my husband tried to defend himself at the company, he even tried to blame me. My uncle stepped in and said, "My niece wouldn't do that. We know you and your mom are responsible. You're lucky we haven't called the police." Seeing that things weren't going his way, he looked defeated. Later, I went to the office to return the wedding gifts to my colleagues. Even though my marriage ended, they didn't want the gifts back, saying they had given them with love. In the midst of all this support, my husband tried to apologize, asking if I could get him out of the mess he was in. He begged, "Why didn't you tell me about your family connection? Can we start over? Can you ask your uncle to help me keep my job and make the embezzlement charges go away?" I was disgusted and replied, "Divorce is the only option now. You need to face the consequences." I pushed him away, and a colleague called security to remove him. He was fired, and the company pursued legal action for the embezzlement. When my mother-in-law kept contacting my family, my father-in-law stepped in and put a stop to it. I had always wondered why he seemed quiet about our marriage, but now, I saw he was the only person I could trust in that house. Even though my honeymoon had turned into a nightmare with my husband and mother-in-law, I didn't feel like quitting my job. My parents suggested I take a break from work instead, and my uncle thought staying busy would help me. The company arranged for me to transfer to a new branch, where I was supported by kind colleagues and bosses. The divorce process was going smoothly, thanks to my lawyer. Later, I found out that my father-in-law had helped with the divorce. During our wedding planning, I learned that my husband had very little savings. His family, with expensive habits, didn't have much either. However, The alimony I received was substantial, and my father-in-law had to sell their home to cover it. On the day I was supposed to go on our honeymoon, I returned to my in-laws' house with my luggage. The neighborhood, where everyone knows each other, started gossiping. The rumors became so exaggerated that it became unbearable to live there. My mother-in-law had approved of the marriage because both my husband and I worked for prestigious companies. It was a status symbol for her, but after everything that happened, she probably couldn't handle the shame. My father-in-law also felt burdened by the financial damage caused by my husband's actions. While I have no sympathy for my husband or mother-in-law, I do feel sorry for my father-in-law. After my husband was fired and ordered to pay damages, he had a breakdown and is now living in a small apartment. My mother-in-law withdrew, and my father-in-law even considered divorcing her. He reached out to me and asked if I could connect him with the lawyer I used. I asked my uncle to help, and he made the connection. It may take time, but I hope my father-in-law can find peace. I'm grateful for the support of my uncle and the company. I was transferred to a new branch, and my colleagues and bosses have been kind. The only thing I regret is missing out on the honeymoon destination we had planned to visit. Once everything settles, I hope to take a relaxing trip abroad to make up for it. Music. Music.